Welcome to Nation Building. I'm your host, Winston Pinnock. On our program, we examine the political, social, and moral issues in the leadership of the Bahamas. On our program today, we have a very special guest, and I'll go ahead and introduce my guest to you once we come back from this break.
The concierge service is the best thing ever. Like, it is so fabulous, especially for someone like me where I cannot leave my office, my job to go do anything in the middle of the day because I'm on the radio. The service was so fabulous. The ladies gave me a call, they set up an appointment, they come with their professional looking attire, they're just so cute. And they come here and it was a great experience. It took 20 minutes to switch over to the Alive service. It was simple, it was easy, and they just made me feel so welcomed. They explained everything. They hooked me up with my new phone, they gave me my data package, as you can see, hey. And it was fabulous. It was a wonderful service, but what I really liked best about it was not only did they come here and make it easy for me, but they continued to check up on me. The next day, they made sure that everything was working properly with the phone. I didn't have any issues. The following week, they contacted me again, and I've built a relationship with them. They've continued to check up on me. I feel like I'm part of the Alive family. It's amazing.
Hello, I'm Wendell Jones, and every time I sit down and I watch JCN television, I drink the Jamaica Bahama fruit juice. It's so pleasing to the palate.
I've been cooking Bahamian dishes for generations. I now use Jamaica Bahamas product. The rice is very fluffy, very tasty, and good eating. Jamaica Bahama product is simply the best.
As an insurance agent, my life is go, go, go. But whenever I need a refreshing break, it's Jamaica Bahamas Island Mixed Fruit Drink. Good.
Hi, I'm Debbie Bartlett from GEMS 105.9 FM. The effect that Island Junkanoo Juice Medley has on me is exhilarating.
Welcome back to Nation Building. I'm your host, Winston Pinnock. Today, we are bringing you a very, very special show. We're talking about the budget, the 2018-2019 budget. And I have the privilege of introducing to the nation, for the first time on our program, the Deputy Leader of the Progressive Liberal Party, Mr. Chester Cooper. Mr. Deputy Leader, how are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you, and thanks for having me on your show.
Yes, and thanks for coming. We took him out of the budget presentation to come here, and he graced us with his presence. So we're going to dive right in and get into the meat of what the people in our country want to know, and that is about this budget. As I believe this is one of the more interesting budget presentations that I have seen so far as public reaction to the budget. And I suspect that has to do with the proposed tax increase. Just wanted you, this is the first time you have appeared on our program, and I wanted you to tell us very quickly, what do you see your role as Deputy Leader of the Progressive Liberal Party over the next 4 years in helping to rebuild your organization? A lot of young people, and those are not so young, who are from your party, members of your party, talk about you a lot, and your leader as well, as one of the bright lights that points to the future. And so I wanted to get you on the record, just to share your heart, to say, what do you really see your role in helping your organization, if in my own words I could say, which is at a low ebb compared to where it was years ago?
Thank you very much again, and thank you for your kind compliments. Certainly, I am delighted to be a part of the leadership team of the Progressive Liberal Party. The job of deputy is to be a team player and support the leader and the leadership's mission. My objectives over the next few years would be to work hand in hand with the leader to ensure that we are rebuilding the base of our party. We're reconnecting with our supporters and Bahamians across the Bahamas. and certainly we are preparing to be the next government of the Bahamas through revitalizing our mission, working steadily to improve our image, and refining our message. So this is going to take a lot of work behind the scenes. A lot of that work has started. We have begun working on our platform. We have begun reviewing our constitution.
This early?
Yeah, so we're off to the races, as it were. We are working very diligently to be ready to govern. And we want to demonstrate to the Bahamian people that we are the opposition, and our job is, in some part, to oppose the government of the day. But more importantly, we want to demonstrate that we are ready to govern, and we are the alternate government, if you will.
And just before we move on to the budget, which is what we're here for, but I want to be more specifically, do you feel the weight that is placed on you? You are a fresh face to politics and to your party. And again, as I said, it is well known that a lot of people in your organization and in the country, those who are independent-minded folks that are not loyal to either party, look to you. The PLP was booted out of office in a very dramatic fashion, and the people sent a message to your party as to what, and in many cases why, they didn't want you to return as government, your party that is. But you were a new face to the party. Do you understand the weight of people's desire to have persons like yourself, and you in particular, to step up and to function, not just to oppose the government, but to provide alternatives for the country? And to your party's membership, more specifically, those who placed a heavy load on, they mention your name almost at every turn in looking to the future. When you talk about issues, I had a group of young liberals on the program a month ago or so, and as we got into a lot of dicey issues, one of the things that they pointed to when we talked about the past of the PLP is look at Chester Cooper and the young minds that the party has in its belly helping to rebuild. And so I'm saying that there's a lot of, do you feel that weight?
Well, firstly, I'm grateful that the people of Exuma and Ragged Island elected me to be a member of Parliament. When we set out on the mission on my campaign in Exuma, it wasn't the design that we would be in opposition. So therefore, I was called as a member of opposition to be deputy leader. And by doing so, I answered the call of the people, and I fully comprehend the magnitude of the responsibility. Our party is in transition. We will revisit the core values of our party. We will speak to economic empowerment, and I believe I have a compelling story with respect to my track record in business, with very humble beginnings from Forbes Hill, Little Exuma, and this resonates with people across the country. So what I hope to do is to continue the mission that the Progressive Liberal Party has started by bringing my experience to bear. There's been a lot of social transformation. There's been a lot of political transformation where people now fully recognize the strength of their vote and their ability to change governments. But we haven't yet arrived in terms of economic transformation. And therefore, I take it as my purpose and my calling to lead the platform in empowering Bahamians, creating more successful Bahamian entrepreneurs. And certainly, this platform will be a key plank in the Progressive Liberal Party moving forward. So I recognize that my role fundamentally is critical to the progressive path of the Progressive Liberal Party moving forward. And I've been called, and when you're called as a leader, you step up the plate and you perform.
And just to be sure, are you willing to commit to the Bahamian people now that you will not provide the kind of opposition that the country has traditionally seen, where opposition parties have traditionally just opposed for the sake of opposing?
If you reflect on all of my interventions in the House of Assembly and otherwise, my objective really is to provide very constructive feedback and advice to the government in many respects. If they determine not to accept my advice, that's on them. My objective is to point out what I believe is good, bad, and ugly in their policies. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of ugly, and therefore we've spent a lot of time pointing out where they're falling short. But if you read my speeches, if you listen to me in Parliament, if you look at my interventions in the press, it's always for the good of the Bahamas. I'm a Bahamian first, Exomian second, and a PLP third. And therefore, we must continue to build our party. I've committed to the people of Exuma that my primary focus will be to build Exuma. And certainly we believe that the Progressive Liberal Party is the vehicle for the advancement of the Bahamas and the best party to lead the Bahamas into the future.
Well said. I erred at the beginning of the program by not introducing my today co-host, Mr. Darren Cash. Nice to be back, Mr. Cash.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful.
And my objective is to just throw out the hardball questions if you skip any.
Okay, wonderful.
And of course, he needs no introduction.
Right, he needs no introduction. And of course, Mr. Cash is a regular to our program that provides, both of you share in that you both have been and continue to be expert in the accounting field. And so I guess there's no accident why you serve as the opposition shadow minister for finance. And so your leader wanted you here to represent your organization today. So we'll dive in. And the first question, as it relates to the budget, Mr. Cooper, is there is a lot of people in the country who see your party and what has been transpired in the last few weeks surrounding the budget issue, your press conferences and so forth, and what has been presented in Parliament, who say that you and your leader have no standing in many of the issues that you're pushing forward because of the record of the PLP, the last administration. How do you respond to that?
Well, firstly, let me be very clear that I am a newcomer to politics. This is my first time in the House of Assembly. And I think when we look at much of the banter that's proffered by the government, many times they're not really telling you the full story. When you listen to the Honorable Minister of Finance yesterday in the House of Assembly, and he talked about how the Progressive Liberal Party has not met their financial projections. They would project one thing and then the numbers would come in differently. Well, he knows full well that projections are what they are. What he didn't say was that from 2014 to 2016, there was a steady decline in the deficit. He did not say that. And what he did not say, that he acknowledged in his budget communication last year that there were significant challenges presented to the country as a result of the hurricanes. One, with respect to dampening revenues, and two, with respect to increasing expenditures. Now to your question, I mean, is the PLP a perfect party? No. Did the PLP do everything at a grade of A+? No. Was there room for improvement? Yes. So when we talk about the track record of the Progressive Liberal Party and whether the leader has a standing to comment on these issues, we must be careful to always acknowledge and recognize that the Free National Movement has formed a government. The Progressive Liberal Party has been fired, and therefore we look to the government for leadership. We look to them to provide the type of economy and the type of leadership that inspires confidence in the economy. And when they don't do so, we have an obligation as the opposition to point that out on behalf of the Bahamian people. So we can talk about the past, but really I'd much prefer looking to the future, looking to what needs to happen to grow our economy, to cause there to be even more fiscal prudence than we've seen over the past year. Let's be candid. The F&M has been the government of the Bahamas for 16 of the last 26 years and counting. So there's enough blame to go around, and this is why I don't entertain the conversation too much when it comes to blaming all of the woes in the country on the last 5 years, when we have been an independent country for 40 plus, and 16 of those years have been under the Free National Movement's government.
I hear you, sir. Talking about the economy, then let's dive right in. The government says that it's done a decent job over the last year in office economically. It's reduced the, there's been a reduction of $351 million in the budget over the 2016-2017 budget. Do you give them credit for that?
Well, I think we have to discuss it a bit more extensively to really understand what the statistic mean. Any government of the Bahamas who reduces the deficit ought to be commended for doing so. Well,
let's just to be clear, so I don't trip you up. It is not actually a deficit reduction. It's a reduction
compared to last
spending
compared to last year.
Right.
So
in essence, they're saying they spent $351 million.
I follow the point that he made, and what I am saying is there are a lot of factors that fed into the arrival
reduced spending
at the number.
Right.
There is the discussion of cash versus accrual and whether the minister's actions at the end of the year was consistent with prior years. There's a question as to whether the Ministry of Finance went to great lengths to ensure that all outstanding bills were paid immediately versus managing them the way they've been managed before. So there's a rule of consistency in accounting, and we are not sure whether that's being applied then versus prior years, and we're not sure as to whether it's being applied now versus last year. And this is why in my presentation in the House of Assembly, I will call for investigation by the Internal Auditor into these matters, an investigation by the Public Accounts Committee into these matters, so that when we talk these numbers, we don't tell half of the story. It's important that the Bahamian people understand the truth and the whole truth. And sometimes we get caught up in discussing sleight of hand accounting and talking about statistics without fully elaborating. There's an old rule I learned in Statistics 101. There's little white lies, there's big lies, and then there's statistics. So statistics, if not used responsibly, can tell any story. And it's important that we get the story right, because the Bahamian people are not interested in the bantering between the PLP and the FNM. The Bahamian people want responsible government. They want jobs, they want economic activity, and they want a better way of life for their family. And the sooner we as politicians come to terms with that, our credibility will go up in the eyes of the Bahamian people.
Not sure if the deputy leader of the Progressive Liberal Party is accusing the Minister of Finance of little white lies. Not sure, but we're going to take this break. You're watching Nation Building. I'm your host, Winston Pinnock, and we'll let him clarify when we come back from this break.
I've been a customer for the past 2 years, and I will say the quality of the service is very good. During my trip to Andros, I was connected the entire trip. So that was really good. I was able to contact my family members and let them know how the trip was going. We touched land, we're here. So it was very good. And I really appreciate that. And also during times like when we had the storm, it was really good to have that service to reach out to our loved ones to make sure everyone is okay. And I really appreciate Alive for that. And even when there's a little technical difficulty, they always send out a little text message to let us know exactly what's going on. I'm happy to be alive, and I believe in best.
Hello, I'm Wendell Jones, and every time I sit down and I watch JCN television, I drink the Jamaica Bahama fruit juice. It's so pleasing to the palate.
I've been cooking Bahamian dishes for generations. I now use Jamaica Bahamas product. The rice is very fluffy, very tasty, and good eating. Jamaica Bahama product is simply the best.
As an insurance agent, my life is go, go, go. But whenever I need a refreshing break, it's Jamaica Bahamas Island Mixed Fruit Drink. Good.
Hi, I'm Debbie Bartlett from GEMS 105.9 FM. The effect that Island Junkanoo Juice medley has on me is exhilarating.
Welcome back to Nation Building. I'm your host, Winston Pinnock, and we are privileged today to have with us the Deputy Leader of the Progressive Liberal Party, Mr. Chester Cooper, who is the opposition spokesperson, the Shadow Minister of Finance. Mr. Cooper, before we went to the break, of course, we had an interesting discussion, you telling us about these, what you learn in finance. We're going to move on and talk a little more specifics in the budget, and I believe your finance colleague has one or two questions for you that he would like to ask. Mr. Cash?
I think the main question I want to pose to the Deputy Leader is whether or not you accept as a reality the fact that value-added tax needed to be increased, if not in 2018, 2019, at least over the next 2 years.
I do not accept the explanations provided by the Free National Movement government. I do not accept the thesis on which the arguments are based. I do not see a straight line in terms of the philosophy, the guiding principles, or any form of center on which their philosophy is really grounded. Last year in the budget, they said they would reduce taxes because reduced taxes drives the economy. This year, they say that they're going to increase taxes. They're driven by the fact that they want more revenues, but then they offer extensive concessions. They say that the PLP spent too much, but yet they're increasing their expenditure by $500 million. They said the PLP borrowed too much, but yet they increased their borrowing by $1.4 billion net in the space of 1 year. So it's very difficult to follow the analysis of the minister and the government as to how and why they arrived at the need to increase VAT to 12%. Look, I was involved with the Chamber of Commerce when we formed the Coalition for Responsible Taxation. We had an opportunity to consult, first of all. The government shared information with us. The Christie administration got it right in terms of consultation with the business community and civil society. We had an opportunity to educate ourselves. We brought in consultants. We had a national symposium on tax reform. We engaged Oxford consultants to come to advise us and educate our members. We had an opportunity to discuss VAT with the New Zealand government's implementation team, who were the advisors to the government. And after all of the extensive discussions, it was determined that 7.5% VAT with no exemptions was the best way to go. It was the most efficient way to do it. And every international rating bodies who looked at the implementation praised the government of the Bahamas for how they did it, how efficient it worked, and how well the collections were being executed. In the first year, $1 billion was collected by the government for VAT, and now this government has determined that they are going to dismantle the model. With respect to revenue collections generally, the Revenue Enhancement Unit that the minister praised on becoming elected, he now says was floundering. He praised this unit for having collected $96 million from what he called tax cheats, according to The Guardian. And therefore, it tells me that more can be done by way of collecting existing taxes. I am not satisfied that this government has done enough to collect tax arrears. They were swift in making payments at the end of the year, swift to blame the PLP for all the payments that hadn't been made, but they weren't equally aggressive in terms of collecting what's outstanding. So if there's $400 million outstanding in real property tax, let's use that number. Maybe this revenue enhancement unit that was reportedly collecting up to $30 million additional revenue per month would have been very effective in terms of improving revenue targets. This government has missed its revenue projection target by $130 million. We believe, had they stayed the course, had they continued to empower the Revenue Enhancement Unit, that this move may not have been necessary. And then talking about the no line in the philosophy and the ideology of the government. They give it with one hand, they take it away with the other hand. And you know, there's just so much to be said about this. When we examine the concessions, again, we see no clarity in what this government is doing. So they seem to be making it up as they go along. Now, I haven't seen the models that they're working with. They're good professionals working in the Ministry of Finance, and I'd like to assume that they have some information that I haven't seen. And this is why we're going to ask the Auditor General to look into these matters as well. And we will have the Public Accounts Committee look into it as well, because once we see it, we might be more assured. But at this point, there's nothing said by this government that gives me the assurance that a 12% VAT increase is necessary at this time. And as a result of that, I can say definitively that the Progressive Liberal Party will vote against these taxes.
Mr. Cooper, your position is well stated about the party's opposition and the reason for the opposition. How do you, with a straight face, say to the Bahamian people that you would vote against this when the government has laid out a long list of what they call giveaways or breaks to the people, including the reduction of VAT from everything from corned beef to cheese, rice, all the breadbasket items, other things such as the increase in travel exemption from $300 to $500, and the list goes on and on. The electricity, we talked about where they've reduced taken VAT off electricity with a threshold of up to $200. And so they've come out with a long list, clothing items for businesses, which is now free, duty free. They've come out with a long list of what they're saying is these are the giveaway, these are what they're giving the Bahamian people, giving back to them. Aren't those good things?
There are a lot of potentially good things in the budget. I'm not sure this is one of them. One hand give it, the other hand take it away. And let me give you an example. With the exemption on electricity, first of all, this government is making it up as they go along, because day before yesterday, it was on the first $100 on electricity that we would get the exemption. Yesterday, it was on the first $200. Day before yesterday, the hotels were to be taxed at a rate of 12% on VAT, and today there are numerous other concessions, okay? The Bahamian people are very smart. Even when we're not educated, we have an instinct about life and about money and the cost of living. And I am confident that when the average individual go to the grocery store, they will discover that by and large, their bill will be equal to or higher than it was before. Let me explain. The way VAT works, and I'm not so sure that this government has immersed itself into the details of the triggers of VAT. But let's take the electricity example. So on the first $200, you get an exemption. First of all, the minister didn't say whether it's exempt or whether it's zero rated. So let's say
what's the difference?
Let's say it's exempt based on what the minister said. What will happen basically is that because the consumer isn't paying the VAT still needs to be paid in simple terms to the government, and therefore the corporation, whether it's the Grand Bahama Utilities or whether it's BPL or St. George's Power, will now have to absorb the cost of VAT, because in simple terms they're required now to pay the government.
But the government certainly can't tell a private company to pay them.
Well, if the law says it's exempt, the more technical explanation is they can no longer offset their credits, their input credits against the portion of their business.
So that's an increase in rates.
So yes. So what's happening really is the corporation now must absorb an additional 12% equivalent to that exemption in VAT. Okay? Because these corporations are generally struggling and cannot absorb the cost, what do you think will happen?
Your rate would increase.
They're going to pass it on to the consumer. So basically, that's in effect what's going to happen. If it's zero rated, the government is saying we're going to forego that revenue. So if the government foregoes the revenue, then in effect, their revenue targets are significantly impacted. And let me just finish the thought. It is my back of the envelope analysis that the impact on the electricity sector in relation to VAT, the total that they would have paid had they not been exempted would be 20%. There would be a 20% difference now. In other words, there will be a significant impact, shortfall in government revenues from this sector that they would have gotten had they not done the exemptions. And what this does, it throws off the model. It throws off how much money is needed to make up the balanced budget that they're pushing for. So let's say that number is 100 million, just picking a number. They're now 100 million off from what they projected. So what type of modeling is this that changes just because the sun came up today? There has to be more science, and this is why I'm very concerned with respect to the modeling, whether they've properly contemplated the exemptions, what they're doing, whether the exemptions will in fact have the intended outcome, or whether there will be unintended consequences as a result of the exemptions themselves.
But Mr. Cooper, just before Mr. Cash chiming, I just want to make it clear for our viewers. You have put forward two possibilities. Certainly you must agree with me, the government, we were assuming, could not have made this determination without doing the necessary evaluations and studies to determine, so that the budget, the projections certainly could not have been made without this factored in.
Let me just say this. I believe that there are some good public servants who've assisted the government in coming up to the point of issuing a budget communication. Now, the budget communication having already been issued, the government comes back and they now say, wait, we're going to make it 200 instead of 100, right? So it goes now to the heart of your question. I mean, what impact does it have on the model that gave them assurance that this is the right thing to do? What impact will the confusion and the lack of clarity in the hotel sector would have on the revenue projections? What impact does it have when the rate of tax go up? What impact does it have on compliance, for example, and the behavior of the public? In economics, we call it elasticity. What happens when something else occurs? And this is what we don't know. We do not know how sophisticated the models are that they're using. We don't know whether they receive good quality tax advice or whether they simply accepted hook, line, and sinker the advice of the IMF. We do not know because there's been no consultation. Had they spoken with the Hotel Association, they would have understood that the Hotel Association does bookings of rooms well in advance, and they've factored in 7.5%. They would know what the impact would be on the gaming industry. They would know what the impact would be on BPL or any other business in the community. But there was no consultation. Therefore, I don't have a lot of assurance.
We're going to pick up with Mr. Cash right on that point when we come back from this break. You're watching Nation Building. I'm your host, Winston Pinnock, and we'll be right back with Mr. Cooper after this break.
The concierge service is the best thing ever. Like, it is so fabulous, especially for someone like me where I cannot leave my office, my job to go do anything in the middle of the day because I'm on the radio. The service was so fabulous. The ladies gave me a call. They set up an appointment. They come with their professional looking attire. They're just so cute. And they come here and it was a great experience. It took 20 minutes to switch over to the Alive service. It was simple. It was easy. And they just made me feel so welcomed. They explained everything. They hooked me up with my new phone. They gave me my data package. As you can see, hey. And it was fabulous. It was a wonderful service, but what I really liked best about it was not only did they come here and make it easy for me, but they continued to check up on me. The next day, they made sure that everything was working properly with the phone. I didn't have any issues. The following week, they contacted me again, and I've built a relationship with them. They've continued to check up on me. I feel like I'm part of the Alive family. It's amazing.
Who said you can't get great quality products at an affordable price? If you want the best quality food products at the most affordable prices, you must pick up the Jamaica Bahama brand of fine quality products at your favorite food store. Products like Jamaica Bahama Coconut Water, the most healthy and refreshing drink on the market. Jamaica Bahama Fruit Punch, the only fruit punch in the Bahamas made from real fruit. Jamaica Bahama Coconut Milk, green pigeon peas with coconut milk, condensed milk, kidney beans with coconut milk, corned beef, green pigeon peas, mackerel, and corn. Jamaica Bahama's fine line of products is available at all your favorite food stores and convenience stores nationwide. Telephone 351-8282 in Freeport and 341-4091 in Nassau. I don't wanna win. No, no, I don't wanna win.
Welcome back to Nation Building. I'm your host, Winston Pinnock, and we are here today with the Deputy Leader of the Progressive Liberal Party, the Shadow Minister of Finance, Mr. Chester Cooper. Mr. Cash, you had some questions.
I simply wanted to stand in for Minister Turnquest and suggest to the Deputy Leader that he's doing politics as usual. On the one hand, he says they're making it up as they go along, and then on the other hand, he accuses the government of not consulting. And it seems to me that increasing the BPL exemption from 100 to 200 reflects at least a receptiveness on the part of the government to listen to the cries of the people. And as far as the hotels are concerned, if they're making adjustments post communication, it seems as though they are at least consulting or being responsive to a pretty significant part of the industry. So Minister Turnquest is likely to say that the deputy lead is trying to have it both ways.
Well, let me say this. I do want the government to get this right. It is important to me as a businessman, it's important to the Bahamian people, it's important to this generation and the next that this government gets it right. It's important that we have good, sound fiscal management. It's important that we are accountable and that we are transparent. So I agree with the minister on all the buzzwords that he uses. What I am suggesting is consultation, true, genuine consultation happens before. And it happens because no one is all-knowing. That's a basic premise. And therefore, had the consultation been done in advance, the minister would have been able to build into his model the eventualities of the hotel sector in this particular case. And I'm not sure who he would have consulted, who advised him that instead of 100 exemption on BPL to now go to 200. I'm not sure where that would have come from. If he was reacting to the cries...
He might have been bowing to the pressures that you have been putting on in
Well,
Parliament.
if he's reacting to the cries of the Bahamian people, then, you know, I would suggest that he has gotten the response wrong because the people have a significant outcry about the 12%. And no amount of gyrations or exemptions or one hand giving it will appease the Bahamian people. Because, again, there's been no consultation. It's been implemented very swiftly. Maybe the minister would have had more credibility with the Bahamian people had the VAT rate been staged. In other words, instead of going rapidly and immediately to 12%, maybe scaled it and forecast it over a period of time and say at the end of the year we'll do another assessment, and if we determine that the rate we used in year one was adequate, then we'll come back to you, the Bahamian people, and we will show you what the outcome has been. It's a partnership after all. So you don't just run out and increase it and then hope that everybody goes along with you. I know the government's responsibility is to lead, but they must lead responsibly.
Mr. Pinnock, maybe we can break some news on this program today because we might get the deputy leader to confirm a change in the way government happens. The concept of budget purdah is well known across the Caribbean and across the British Commonwealth. That view that everything is under wraps until the Minister of Finance presents it in public on budget day. The question I have is Mr. Cooper prepared to say at this point that a progressive Liberal Party government will actually change that practice to a more open, transparent, and consultative approach before budget day going forward if it becomes the government?
Look, we must get this right. The business sector collects VAT on behalf of the government. They are partners.
Right.
And therefore, it seems very pragmatic to have a discussion with your partners before you run out and do something dramatic. Consultation with the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm a past chairman, isn't anything that hasn't been done before. The Chamber has had meetings with the Right Honorable Hubert Ingram. They've had meetings, the Right Honorable Perry Christie, with respect to various legislative changes, including budgets. So it's not unusual for there to be confidential consultations in advance in a very respectful, responsible way.
And the
Which-
minister,
And the minister has said that he
which-
has met with and the chamber chairman recently came out and said that they did have a meeting.
Well, their press release certainly didn't reflect that there had been any
And
advanced
I must say, not to muddy the water, but I must say that announcement was received with annoyance by the owners of the web operators, because they're complaining that, well, you met with the chamber, but now you haven't met with us. But just wanted to say that just recently,
Well, let me,
I think
let,
over the
let
last
me-
day or two.
Let me say that I read the reactions of the gaming industry. I also read with great interest the reaction from the Chamber of Commerce, because I don't recall this very immediate, swift and sure reaction from the Chamber with such surprise happening before. It certainly didn't happen on the implementation
No,
of the
it
18.
didn't, but it happened.
There was open dialogue, and all I am saying is we are where we are. No doubt the minister, this being his, let's call it his first real budget he built from scratch. No doubt there have been some lessons learned. I am the shadow minister of finance. I have the luxury of being in opposition, and I have the luxury of learning from his mistakes, and therefore
And capitalizing on it.
Therefore, to Darren's question, should I or when I have the opportunity to be a part of cabinet, I will use all of the experiences gleaned as a result of the minister's errors, and no doubt he will admit that maybe this was a misstep, and next year I am absolutely sure that he will take a different approach.
To just segue into the whole issue of the issue with the web shop gaming operators in the country, which is now officially, thanks to the Progressive Liberal Party, the previous administration, now a major part of the economy of the Bahamas. Let's look at the issue at hand here, where the minister has proposed and is going ahead with the significant hike in the taxes, the levy on these operators. What is, and we know, what is let me allow you to speak, what is the official position from the opposition party? Had you been minister and your party been in power, what would have been your approach in taxing the gaming industry?
Just before, if I might take one liberty, before you move to increases on gaming, let me just zoom in one last time on the increases in VAT. The Bahamian people feel that they have been betrayed by this government, who hated VAT, who thought it was regressive, who thought it would drive them in prosperity, who thought it was double and triple taxation, who thought it was evil, and on and on and on.
But the minister says he has a right to change his mind.
So they feel betrayed, and there's a very distinct credibility gap now that the minister and this government will have to find a way to bridge if they are going to get through with the implementation of the things that they're doing over the next 4 years in a very constructive way. So there's some healing that has to happen. Now, with respect to the gaming industry, the thing that strikes me most is that in Black Point Exuma, in Acklands and Maguana, where the banks have not participated before, and in places like Long Island and other islands, South Andrews, where the banks have pulled out and there is no cash and go. The consumers in these areas who must buy their groceries typically would use a web shop to put their money on their account and send it to Nassau so that their grocery could be bought. Now, to do that, they charge 5% of what they deposit. So this is one of the fundamental issues I have with respect to the implementation of the tax on gaming. Okay? Now, with respect to the main increases in taxes, I've seen the press release by the gaming industry, and I recognized that there was a very angry reaction to the increases. And again, had there been some discussion, some consultation, I believe this could have been handled differently. I believe had they gone into the Gaming Association and said, look, here is the predicament of the government. We believe you're undertaxed. Here's why we believe you're undertaxed. We need some more taxes because we have great social issues. And we believe, as the minister said, a part of the reason why social services has such great demand is because of gaming. I'm not sure what empirical studies he would have on that. I know that the demands on social services have gone up. I know that the government need ongoing and additional source of revenues, but I think it's a question of what is equitable, what is right, and I believe showing and demonstrating to the Gaming Association what the norms are in the industry, in developed countries, in the Caribbean countries. I believe this would have caused there to be some meeting of the mind. But let me just say, no one, you nor I, maybe only Darren, likes to pay more taxes.
No.
And I was getting to that point without interrupting you, that they wouldn't have agreed, that they wouldn't have agreed to pay more taxes.
Ultimately, the government must do what it believes to be the right thing to do in line with its philosophy, okay? But firstly, we must understand what the philosophy is, and secondly, there's a proper way to get to the point of implementation. And I believe we are at a loss in both of those categories. So this is an area that I believe that will unfold over the coming days, as no doubt the minister is now consulting the Gaming Association in a meaningful way.
So that is breaking news, I guess. Minister is now consulting.
Yeah. I guess on the question of betrayal, the minister is going to be able to say certainly that plays in equal parts both for the opposition and for the government, as far as value-added tax on one hand, and then as far as not consulting, or after having consulting the Bahamian people on the gaming referendum, the previous government going in an opposite direction. The question is, what comes, what's the next phase of consultation going to be like for whomever becomes the government? The question that I have is, from a family island perspective, you talked about the fact that the banks have left a lot of these islands, and fortunately institutions like Cash and Go have been able to move in, and or who've been there actually at the time have been able to pick up the slack in a significant way. Two questions. One, do you think the government has done enough as far as being more aggressive in filling the void that has been left after a number of the banks have left? And secondly, as far as the gaming houses are concerned, do you think they are a suitable alternative in those communities?
Well, let me take the last part of the question first. The reality on the ground dictate that the gaming houses in those small communities, if they're the only mechanism, there is a need that's being filled, okay? So it's not the ideal scenario. Certainly, we want family island communities to have the ability to participate in the mainstream economy through proper banks, and they must be granted an opportunity to do so, notwithstanding that they are in some cases far-flung or small populations. I know that the governor of the central bank is keenly in tune with the problem, and there's been a lot of conversation about digitalization. I believe in the meantime, though, there has to be more done to bridge the gap between where we are now and where we ought to be. Certainly, banking facilities help to formalize economies. It gives Bahamians opportunities to borrow, to save, to invest, and to really improve their quality of life. Whether you live in Auckland or Ragged Island, or whether you live in the big city of Nassau, I believe it's important for the government to ensure, whether it's through the commercial banking or whether it's through an effectively run post office bank or some other hybrid, certainly the government must pay more close attention to this issue.
Well, Minister, called you Minister.
I receive it.
Mr. Deputy Leader, I will hear from my viewers shortly. Mr. Deputy Leader, before you go, as we wrap up, we've completely run out of time, but I could not, on behalf of viewers who sent all sorts of questions to us, put one political question to you before you go, and it's this. Your party is having I think a conclave coming up over the summer.
Yes.
There are a lot of people who have been uncomfortable in and out of the Progressive Liberal Party with the history and the culture of the party in this regard, in how you elect people. People refer, for example, to the endless number of stalwart councillors. Under previous administrations, these people would be set up to ensure that leadership, basically it's like a mafia, to keep leadership in place.
Mafia.
I use mafia, strong term, but it had that effect, as the mafia did. It ensured that whoever was in leadership stayed there. I hear a lot about reform. Would you quickly, in a minute, say to the country what one or two of the major things that you see the party doing in seeing that you're in leadership, in reforming itself, and to provide a greater democracy for the benefit of those who are involved in that process?
There is an active consultative constitutional committee being worked on at the moment. There will be a report to the leadership very shortly. I would prefer not to preempt that report. What I would say, though, that there's a lot of conversation about how stalwarts are appointed, how many can or should be appointed, and when, and what is the process for it to be done. There's also conversation with respect to whether there should be one member, one vote, for example. Those discussions are very live, and I'm not privy to the internal workings of the consultation of the Constitutional Committee, so I don't want to go on a limb and preempt them or predict what they will say. But let me just say this. I believe both political parties would have a system, whether they're meritorious council members or whether they're stalwarts, whether it's insiders or whether it's newcomers. Both parties would have a core group of people that call themselves the establishment, and whether it's the PLP or the FNM. I believe this is the reality of party politics.
So you're saying there are mafias on both sides?
In party politics in our country, and I reiterate, mafia is a very strong word. So that wouldn't be my
take responsibility. That
wouldn't be
for
my
that.
first word choice.
But at least can you say to the nation whether or not Chester Cooper is a reformer who wants to see more progressive methods put into your system to make it more democratic?
Absolutely. I mean, the Progressive Liberal Party is the oldest political party in the Bahamas. We must be relevant for our future members, and we expect that there will be many. No longer can we simply rely on the base support. There's a middle of the road, what we call swing voters, who want to see reform in the political process in the Bahamas. They're tired of the same old politics of the past. And the PLP received 37% of the overall vote. We cannot win an election on 37% of the votes. And therefore, we have received the message from the Bahamian people. We understand what we need to do. And we are in active gear. Some of it you can see, some of it you can't see. But we're in active gear to improve our vision, to improve our image, to improve our message and to be relevant to the Bahamian people.
I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your presentation, which you'll do shortly, to come and appear with us. We really count it a privilege. On behalf of all of us at Nation Building, myself, my co-host, Mr. Darren Cash today, I want to thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for next edition right here on Nation Building, and have a great week as always.